Welcome to the Cultivating Leaders Podcast, where we get inside the minds of leaders to harvest great ideas and lessons that help you grow as a difference maker in food and agriculture. I'm your host and curiosity captain, Nicole Ursig. Today, we are thrilled to have Adam Carroll with us, a visionary leader whose work includes financial literacy, personal empowerment, and leadership development. Adam is the founder of The Shred Method, a groundbreaking platform that equips individuals with strategies for achieving financial independence. He is also a keynote speaker, author of 4 best-selling books, and creator of the impactful documentary Broke, Busted, and Disgusted, featured on CNBC. His thought-provoking TED Talks, which have accumulated nearly 7 million views, highlight his profound insights on leadership, money, and financial literacy. Adam, welcome to the pod.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be with you.
I'm so glad you're here. What did I miss from your bio?
I'm a father of 3, husband of 25 years, which is kind of,
Congratulations.
shocking to even
That's
say the
amazing.
numbers out loud. But to know that I have 3 kids who are now 16, 19, and 21 still kind of blows my mind.
Where are you from, Adam?
I am from Des Moines, Iowa area. I was born and raised in Des Moines. I grew up in a small town just south of Des Moines, where I graduated from high school, and then went to the University of Northern Iowa for my undergrad degree, and then promptly did what most Midwestern kids do. I left the state and went to Colorado and spent 3 years there, spent a year in Texas, a little bit of time in California, and then the mothership called me home, and I'm back in Des Moines.
Love that. Okay, so do you have a background in agriculture at all?
I would say that my background in agriculture is somewhat limited to my grandparents owned a small hobby farm, and we used to love to go and spend weeks during the summer with them. My grandfather raised chickens. He had a small herd of cattle, basically rented farm ground and did a little bit of row crop farming. But we got to go and help him during the summers, and it was a blast to do that.
Awesome. Well, I always got to ask if there's some connection to agriculture. I know you've been working with AFA for years and years, and so very glad to have you today. So let's begin with the shred method. Tell me, what is the shred method, Adam?
Yeah, the shred method is a unique cash flow tool that helps people create income efficiency, which then allows them to blast away debt in record time. So I've been a big proponent and fan of people achieving freedom and flexibility in their lives. And quite often what I find is the debt load they're under is what keeps them from achieving financial freedom and flexibility. And so I found this methodology. We enhanced it, named it the Shred Method, and started coaching people through it. And we've helped hundreds of folks pay off their mortgages and student loans and credit card debt in literally months in some cases, as opposed to decades.
Wow, that's incredible. How did you get passionate about doing things like this, like helping people get out of debt?
We're going to go in the Wayback Machine a little bit. When I graduated from UNI, I tell AFA students this all the time, but I had $8,000 in credit card debt. I was upside down on my car. I had 30 some $1,000s in student loans. I mean, I was kind of your stereotypical debt statistic, and realized that I could get out of it relatively quickly through the nudging and urging of my wife, who said, "Get rid of your debt, or I'm going to get rid of you." Right?
That's good motivation.
It was great motivation. So within 2 years, we had blasted away all of our debt. And I was in this mode where I was like, why don't more people know this? And it made sense to go teach it. So I had a little bit of professional experience speaking to high school and college students, and we were getting lots of money questions. And in 2003 and 4, one of my partners and I said, hey, why don't we create a company that teaches this to the same demographic we were just in? So that's where it started.
Okay, Adam, your career spans finance, leadership, motivational speaking.
Yeah.
Tell me, how did you get to where you are today?
When I was 28 years old, I was in a sales job. And, I'd spent the years of my turbulent 20s trying to figure out who I was and what I wanted to do with my life. And this particular job had me driving all around Denver, Colorado. And in my car, I had motivational CDs that I would listen to. And one of the CDs was by a guy named Mark Victor Hansen. And he was one of the co-authors of Chicken Soup for the Soul. And in that CD, Mark said, public speaking is actually one of the most noble professions, because you get to change people's lives, you get to travel the world, and you get paid relatively decently to do it, right? Because not a lot of people want to do it. And I had known that I enjoyed it. I had a flair for it. I was comfortable on stage. And in that moment at 28, it was just like, I know exactly what I want to go do. And so for the next probably 2 or 3 years, I went on this study of how do I build a business doing that. And so from 28 until today, which I'm 40 several now, I've been doing nothing but, running my own business as a speaker. So yeah.
So, how did your message become financial freedom, financial independence, financially focused?
Yeah, I was really inspired by helping people get to a point where freedom and flexibility were at the cornerstone of who they were. Um, what I realized over time was that I was really studying human behavior because personal finance is really just consumer behavior, right? And then I realized that I was studying behavior, but behavior translates to leadership just as well. And so my core central message really is: are you leading yourself well? Because if you're leading yourself well, people will follow you, generally speaking.
Okay, I love that. Tell me, what tips and tricks do you have for one? How do I know if I'm leading myself well?
Well, this is it's probably a very subjective question. I tend to be someone who is very goal oriented. I believe that there's more that you can squeeze out of every day and every experience and interaction. And so I've been on this like lifelong hunt of life hacks and ways of getting, better sleep, better health, how to create friendships and relationships in a more engaging way. Money was just a natural byproduct of that. And I realized as I started studying human behavior that the more I knew about myself and how I either came across to other people, what my motivation was, my fears, my drives, I then started to realize, oh, I could actually probably guess what other people's are as well, just based on what they're saying. And it made the interactions that much easier. I think the way for anyone else to figure out, are you leading yourself well, is are you proud of the life you're living? When you look back, will you be happy with the decisions you've made in your life? And are other people looking up to you in a way where, to be very candid, there are times where people will say, "Oh, we'd like to welcome Adam, who is a thought leader in blah blah blah." And I heard it enough times where I was like, "Am I a thought leader? I don't know if I'm a thought leader." And then I realized I'm sharing ideas that may be new to certain people, and in that case, maybe I am a thought leader. And folks started coming up and wanting to engage. For me, it's like, okay, I must be leading myself well if other people are looking at me saying, I want to do more of that.
Oh, I like that. Okay, so if I am listening and I just went through those questions and maybe I had a feeling in my stomach of like, ooh, I don't know. Maybe I've got some work to do. What life hacks, tools, tricks? Tell me, where should I start
Yeah.
to change that so that I can answer those questions and say, yeah, I'm proud of the life I'm living. Yes, I'm leading myself well.
We have this lens that we look at our life through, and mine is different than yours, right? And that is based on past experiences and our family upbringing and all of that. Um, I think one of the most profound hacks out there is reaching out to some of your close friends, family members, etc., and just saying, if you could describe me in 3 to 5 words, what words would you use? Because I think I know how I would describe myself. But when I hear other people talk, and come up with 3 to 5 words, it's like, oh, I didn't realize that, you know. And as an example, I had asked this question of some of my family members, and my dad said busy.
Oh, how did that feel?
It felt like he was kind of punching me when I was down, you know? I mean, I somewhat pride myself on having a full schedule. But when I said, what do you mean by busy? He goes, I just think you're committed to being busy. And for me, having raised 3 kids, and I had this sort of gut check moment of, have I been too busy in my life, striving, going for things, having goals that, whether they served me, but did they serve everyone else in my life? I don't know, or didn't know at the time. And so I think a hack is survey the people around you. And what are they saying honestly, candidly about how you are being? And are you willing to take that feedback?
Yeah. What advice do you have for someone who maybe has done that, and has received one of those gut punches? Who's just, I think it can be, feedback is a gift, but it can also be really painful to go through. So, any advice for working through the pain of realizing, like, ooh, that's not what I am hearing from you is not who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. We have this saying when I'm doing leadership development with companies with leaders, and I'll say you have to be willing to accept fearless feedback. And fearless feedback is, it could be harsh. It could be not what you want to hear, but are you willing to accept it? And so if someone has gotten that gut punch kind of feedback, one of the things to do is to decide, is it true? It may be true for someone else. Is it true for me? They're looking at it through their lens, so it may look differently for them than to us. Is it helpful? Is it helpful to know that that's how you are seen? And if you don't want to be seen that way, what can you do differently? So is it true? Is it helpful? And what am I willing to do in order to change it? And for me, hearing I'm busy, my takeaway was, I have to get better at saying no. And I have to be really intentional about what I'm saying yes to, because I'm saying no to something else. So just to put it out there, I would get requests of, can you do this 7 p.m. call? Do a webinar, do something with a team. And for years, I would say, yeah, of course, not a problem. And then I realized I'm missing 7 p.m. 21 games with my boys. I'm missing 7 p.m. nights on the couch with my wife watching a show, right? And I started realizing, is it worth teeing those up? Uh, More than one a week, never going to happen.
Yeah.
Maybe one every other week, sure. But I had to get really particular about, what am I willing to do? And I think what I'm really suggesting in people's lives is that there are boundaries and there's expectations set about how much you're willing to do or not,
Yeah.
in order to preserve and protect the life that you're trying to build.
Yeah. I think what you just said, Adam, so many leaders know, but have a hard time implementing, right? Of like, I'm well aware that I'm a busy person, but and I know boundaries are healthy. Saying no is hard. I think we've all heard no is a complete sentence. Any advice for, okay, how do I do that in a way that, how do I learn to say no? Because I think a lot of us still need to work in that area, right? We got to where, if you're a high performing person, it's because you've said yes a lot. So how do you learn to, okay, when is that a strength taken to an extreme?
Yeah. I'll tell you, my honest answer to that is, when your vision is so crystal clear about what it is you're attempting to do, the no's become very easy. And we use this tool. This might be a good life hack for the show. But when I'm working with groups, quite often, particularly with young professionals, I have them write a 3-year letter. And the 3-year letter is dated 3 years from the day they write it. They're writing it in present tense, as if all of the things have happened in their life over the last 3 years. And they would start out by saying, dear first name. The first name could be themselves. It could be someone important to them, like a spouse or significant other. Could be a grandparent or someone, a mentor, some guide that holds them accountable. I often write it to myself or to my kids, but I would say, dear Adam, I am so happy and grateful that over the last 3 years, the following things have occurred. And that 3-year letter is really instrumental for people in deciding, this is my true north document. So when I'm asked to do something, it's easy to go back to that letter and go, does this fit what I'm trying to accomplish? Does it add to it or does it take away from it? And I think that idea of a full schedule or being busy is because we're not super clear on where we want to go. So all of it looks good.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Oh yeah. It's all good stuff. It's just choosing like what's the best yes.
Yes, exactly. And to that end, um, there are 2 books that I would point to. One, they're both by Napoleon Hill, for what it's worth, and they were both written in the 1930s. But they are today some of the most impactful books that have been written. And one is Think and Grow Rich, which is, should be on everybody's reading list.
Adam, I finished that book last week.
Did you really?
I love that you just recommended it. Yes. Okay. So tell me my next Napoleon Hill read.
Okay, so one thing about Think and Grow Rich is, in the book, the number one lesson takeaway was, great, successful, in his case, wealthy individuals that he wrote about in the 1930s. They had definiteness of purpose. They knew exactly what they were there to do every single day. Napoleon Hill, shortly after reading Think and Grow Rich, or writing Think and Grow Rich, he wrote a book called Outwitting the Devil. And when he wrote it in the 1930s, it was 37 or 38. He let his wife read it. She was his biggest coach and advocate. And she said, Napoleon, I forbid you from ever publishing this book. And he was like, why? This is my most powerful work to date. And she said, we'll be ostracized in the community. We'll be excommunicated from our church. People will shun us because of what you've written. And so it sat in the
This is a really
archives,
good sell for the book, by the way.
right?
Like now I
Right.
want to really want to read it.
It's an amazing read. The audiobook is even better and I'll tell you why in a second. The book itself sat in the Napoleon Hill archives for decades. I mean, literally from the 1930s until the early 2000s. They went through 2 executive directors. With the 3rd executive director, he was going through the archives, read that manuscript, and said, this is more powerful today than it was in the 1930s. And he was writing about Mussolini and all the things that were happening in the 1930s. The gist of the book, which, by the way, was published in 2011 for the first time.
Okay.
80 years later from when it was written, it's published. And the genesis, the basis of the book is that there are drifters and there are non-drifters. And drifters can be blown off course with any great idea. So I could go down, I could chat with students who don't really have an idea of where they want to go. And I should say, you should come with me on this thing. We'd have a ton of fun and it'd be great for you. They go, okay, even though it might blow them completely off course of where they were supposed to be going. Non-drifters are different. They know exactly where they're headed. And in all honesty, at the Leaders Conference, I meet non-drifters all the time. And the non-drifters are like, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to be on the family farm. I'm going to buy this much land. And they know exactly what they're setting out to do. Those people will not be blown off course, and they will find it far easier to say no to things that don't get them where they want to go. And so the book, in a nutshell, talks about how does that work for people? How do you decide where you're going and then keep it at the forefront of all your decisions?
Oh, I love that. I am already excited to read it. Or it sounds like listen to it. Okay, so why is the audiobook better?
The book itself, it's called Outwitting the Devil. The reason that Napoleon Hill's wife forbade him from publishing it is the book literally is a conversation between Napoleon Hill and the devil. So he states at the beginning of the book, I sat down to write this manuscript, and there was this ongoing dialogue in my head going back and forth. And I realized it wasn't me speaking, it was another being, and it was the devil. So you can imagine in the 1930s.
Oh yeah, very, very uncouth, right?
Yeah. I mean, people would be tripped out. And so the audiobook is great because of the voice actor they got to voice the devil's part, because it is
Okay.
eerie. So it's a really, really high quality, well done audiobook. But I would definitely encourage you to listen to it.
Okay, well, you've convinced me for sure. I'm a big fan of what I call get better books, which are,
Yes.
there's leadership,
Love
there's
that.
self-help. I
Yeah.
call them get better books. So I've got my goal this year is I'm reading 50 books. A third of them have to be get better books. So that one's going on the list. So
I
thank
love
you,
this.
Adam.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit. You are an expert in financial literacy. And so I think it'd be remiss if we didn't talk about money a little bit. And so here's my question for you, Adam. Is money real?
Oh, this is the big question, isn't it? Is money real? There are tangible aspects of money that are very real. However, if you look back in history, what's happened is we've been taken off the gold standard, right? It used to be for every dollar that was printed, there would be a dollar in gold in reserves that was held. Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard. And when that happened, our money, US currency, became a fiat currency, which means we can print it and it's under the full faith and trust in the US Treasury. But is it real? I hesitate to say it is. It is as real as the belief we have in it. And so at some point, it may lose that faith and credibility. And if that does happen, then it does become less real. I think the reality or non-reality of money today is more in the fact that they're numbers. We're transferring numbers. I could Cash App you or Venmo you right now. It's not really money. It's just zeros and ones that I'm floating through the ether to your phone, right?
With an emoji attached, right?
With an emoji, yeah.
A pizza emoji or whatever it may be.
Yeah, right, right. Sandwich or a drink, a beverage, right? And so I think the the messaging that I have around money today is if we don't understand the realness of debt, as an example, it's easy to go into debt and not realize how much debt you've taken on because it's so intangible, it's so unreal. It's all zeros and ones. And because of the way we do it, particularly with student loans, over 4 years, 5 years, 7 years, depending on what your education background is, you can take money without having to pay it back. It continually accumulates interest upon interest upon interest and the principal to a point where you're like, I had no idea I borrowed that much money, and I have no idea how much it actually is to pay it back. That's an unreal kind of expectation. And so I have long tried to teach young people, especially, how do we make money super real where they understand handling cash and what the emotional connection to money is before we dip into digital currency where you could have 100,000 in debt and not be aware of it.
Yeah, you have no idea.
Yeah,
You don't feel it in the same way.
correct. And the way the banking system is set up, you have 100 grand in debt, they could say, well, the minimum payment on it is just X, and you can swing that. So just make the minimum payment. And when we do, dutifully, month after month after month, we make banks fortunes, and most consumers get stuck in this. What I call it is they payment themselves into a corner.
Oh, I love that.
Every time we take a payment, I can afford that payment, I can afford this payment. You get too many of those, you have effectively painted yourself into a corner because there's not enough left over to dig yourself out of the hole that you've created.
Mhm. I think this is so important as we think about leadership because if what we were just talking about, like living life on purpose, being someone who is a non-drifter, man, what we were talking about in terms of debt can absolutely take you off course from where you want to go. And especially as we think about agriculture, obviously there's student loans for folks who are working on the corporate side of it, but agriculture is so income finance intensive, especially if you want to enter it. So I am curious for someone who wants to be involved in agriculture, or maybe their family is involved in agriculture. You, I would say some of us get accustomed to, gosh, $1 million loan operating loans is not unusual, right? So how do we create some of that feeling, that reality around money, especially when you're working with such large numbers that don't feel real?
I love this question for a couple of reasons. I'm doing a lot of work with young, beginning, and small farmers, specifically through a client of mine that does lending to farmers. And I said, why me? Why do you want me to come in and talk to them? And they said, point blank, whether a farmer is a quality farmer or not, whether they're skilled at their craft, usually won't take them down. Because you could have somebody who's not great at farming and still make money on a good year, right? They said what takes them down are family financial decisions. They overspend on the trucks, they overspend on Christmas gifts, or they're spending money errantly. They're equating what they have in their operating account as personal income. And so they wanted me to come in and teach psychology of money. And I think in answer to your question, one of the things that has to happen is we've got to start talking about money in a very candid way at the table with kids. We have to have owners of farms, whether that's the grandparent generation, the parent generation, or who's going to take over. We've got to be open about, hey, last year the farm took in this much. This was our debt service number. This is how much we have left over. We probably spent too much on X, Y, and Z this year. I mean, literally like spelling out what does this look like? And we're probably, we are definitely in the minority. I wouldn't say probably. We are definitely in the minority as a family in that my kids have access to my wife and I's accounts
Oh,
in that they could log on and they could see, oh, this is how much mom and dad have in checking and savings and against the home equity line of credit and so on.
wow. Okay. Explain that because yes, that is unconventional.
It was not super intentional. We had set them up on our our banking program, we operate through a credit union, and it just so happened that we had one login, but everyone's accounts were visible. And at first I was like, is this weird that they can see it? And then I realized, no, they have a really healthy understanding of what's going in and what's going out. And again, it puts us in the minority because I know a lot of parents who are like, I would never share this with my kid.
Especially because kids talk and tell people things. And I think that is probably if I am thinking with, a mindset of like, are they going to go tell their teacher at school or their friend or whatever, what's in the family bank account?
Right, right. We've had discussions about that before. And I would say your personal finances are personal. That's something you keep to yourself. We keep to ourselves. It's not something to go spill the beans, so to speak, at school. But what I wanted to give them was a sense of here's how a home operates. Here's what the expenses are. And per my TED talk, we had given our kids allowance through the years, and then made their expenses. The whole idea being I wanted money to be tangible and real for them before they got to school and had a $5,000 credit card that they could go crazy with. And I will say, my kids are 16, 19, and 21. They are probably some of the most money savvy young people you'll ever meet. They're relatively conservative. They appreciate minimalism. They're investors. They're savers. They're generous. They're all the things you would want someone to be as it relates to finance.
Well, and I bet they're fairly grounded because they understand what things cost.
Yes, 100%.
Which I think, going back to our conversation around being a part of a family business in agriculture, there's some folks who work on the family farm who don't like you may work there for years but not understand the cost of everything.
Yeah, yeah.
So, question for you: you're an unconventional family, but it seems to be working and creating what or it sounds like are going to be great
Knock
humans.
on wood.
um, so, any advice or tips because money is a taboo topic for a lot of people and a lot of families. How do you dip your toe into beginning to have those conversations?
Yeah. At the leaders conference, I shared that. Well, first of all, I said, how many of you were your parents were in their 20s when they had you? You were 0 to 9 when your parents were largely in their 20s, and people raised their hand. How many of you were your parents were in their 30s when they had you, 40s, 50s? And I said, when people are in their 20s, do they have any money? The answer is generally no,
No.
right?
Mhm.
Not a lot anyway.
Yeah.
And so what they hear growing up is different than someone who had their children in their 40s or 50s, because by that point in time, they probably had a little bit. So one of the things that we state there is that the roots produce the fruits. And the roots, when we're growing up and when we're 0 to 9, I say 0 to 9 because our money personality is set by the age of 9, generally speaking.
Okay. Wow.
And what we
Yeah.
have little,
Explain that.
well,
Yeah.
we have little ears, but we're big listeners when we're kids, and we put meaning on things. And so, let's say that your parents were in their 20s when they had you, and they told you all the time, Nicole, we can't afford it. We can't afford that. We're broke. Sorry, we can't afford it. 0 to 9-year-old Nicole would say, "Oh, there are things that I can't afford in life." And so lots of things would be seen as out of reach for you because there are just things that you as a family can't afford. And someone who's in their 40s might have said, "Yeah, if you want it, get it. Sure, let's go, let's get it because there's extra money." And that person might be raised in a mindset of like, if I want something, I always buy it because that's how I was raised growing up. I always got what I wanted, right? Similarly, a young person that hears, "You don't need that." Growing up, we go to Target. I want this. I want this. You don't need that. They'll typically take one of two paths. They'll either go down this path of denying themselves things that they really want because there are just things they don't need. They've been told that for years. Or they'll go down a path where, when I get money, I'm going to buy whatever the heck I want. And they're the ones typically that have massive credit card debt and they're in over their head on student loans and things like that. So, how do you have it? Back to your original question. Go talk to your parents and say, what were your early money memories like? What did you hear growing up? What were your parents saying about money? How did that influence who you are today? And maybe how you raised us. And then the message that I gave them was their story, your parents' story, was their truth. It wasn't the truth, and it doesn't have to be your truth, but it was their truth at the time. We just put meaning on it when we were 0 to 9. And so when we start to question, like, what was going on when they were that age? And is that legitimate for me to live my life by? Is it helpful? Is it legitimate? And if I want to change it, can I change it because I'm living in a different time and era?
I love that. I also love that the way you are framing it is more of how do I get to know my parents better, almost from a human standpoint and their story, rather than like let's sit down and the first conversation around money I'm having is let's pull out the balance sheet
Yeah,
or the bank account.
totally.
Because I think with money being such a hard topic to talk about, feeling very taboo, especially in conservative families, if you start from almost building a money relationship, it is what it sounds like you're giving advice around is "Okay, let me build a money relationship by understanding you and your beliefs first, then we can have these harder conversations that lead to okay, like let's talk about how much we're spending on the farm and where it's making money, maybe where it's not, or those kinds of things."
And you hit the nail on the head. It is a money relationship. We all have one. And the way that we somewhat creatively ask what your relationship to money is if you imagine you're sitting in your living room and there's a knock at the door and you go to the front door and you open it and money is standing there personified. Money in human form is standing outside your door. What does it look like and what is your relationship to it?
That is fascinating to think about. I am envisioning, have you seen Schoolhouse Rock?
Yes,
Okay.
yes,
I just had like a dollar bill that looks like when a bill becomes a law. Are you
yeah,
guys seeing?
that's it.
Yes.
Yes,
Very interesting.
yeah.
But yeah, okay, cool.
And here's what's cool about that is because yours is sort of cartoonish and not a person, you probably have a healthy relationship to money in that it's a thing, it's a method of transaction. But if someone says, oh, it's an elderly woman who's really put together, she's clutching her handbag, which might be kind of expensive, she's well dressed, etc., I would make a few assumptions. Number one, that this person believes that you don't have money until you're old. They probably have someone in their life, like a grandmotherly figure, who represents money for them. And they're probably very put together. And there are rules that you follow around money because grandma would do that, right? Um, Contrast that with someone who says, and I had this one time, oh, money's this really attractive woman across the bar that I'm afraid to go talk to. And I was
Oh,
like, oh, bro, we need to unpack that. There's some psychology in this.
yeah.
And, but what it was afraid to look at his balances. He was afraid to talk about money. It caused fights and arguments at home. So he was like, oh, I don't want to talk to it. I like it. I want to be close to it, but I'm afraid of having the conversation.
Hmm. It is interesting, like how what we are talking about here is money, but how much it is really just about humans and our relationships with each other and ourselves, which I think is what ties it right back to leadership
Totally.
and leadership of ourselves, which is your main message.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would probably be remiss if I didn't mention that, I have met people who um, I would love to follow. I think they're great leaders, et cetera. But then there's a peek behind the curtain. It's like, wow, they're over leveraged on a number of things, struggling to get by. It's kind of a facade, right? The wealth that is shown, and for me, there is a feeling of like, oh man, how hard must it be to live a life where that is the facade you're trying to put forward is one that you're struggling with every single day. I'm a big believer that you can't pour from an empty bucket. And so we've got to mind and manage that and lead ourselves well so that we can pour from a bucket that's full, be generous, be kind, be considerate, make great decisions that aren't just money motivated. I think to do that, you've got to practice some of the things that I talk about in my program.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I think we've talked about some proactive things that people can do, some things that self-reflective things that people can do. What if I am someone who is I'm already in the hole, I'm in debt, maybe I'm a little scared about it. Um, what what advice do you have for someone in that scenario who's like I'm scared to look at the balance sheet because I know it's bad and it seems overwhelming to even think about dealing with.
I'm going to give a couple of tacks on this. Number one is the reason that I think some people get there is they never had the tangible holding a $50 or $100 bill and breaking it because there's an interesting thing that happens to you mentally. If I'm handing over a $50 bill to you, um, and you take it from in exchange for the Celsius can you have sitting next to you, there's a feeling of pain going that triggers in my brain because I'm losing $50. But if you said, "Hey, Adam, I'll sell you the Celsius can. It's only $47. Just tap here and you can have it." I'll do that. I'm in positive anticipation of taking my first drink of your drink, right? Same thing is true on one click ship on Amazon. We hit that button and we're like, oh boy, when are the drones going to arrive? What am I going to do?
Yep.
Um, so someone who might be overspending, they're overspending probably because they don't understand how much did I actually spend today, and I never felt any pain, so I didn't know how much I spent. So the first strategy or tactic is go all cash for a period of time, and you'll realize when the cash is gone, I can't buy anymore. That's the rule of thumb. So that's number one. Number two, I would ask, what is the buying getting you? Because some people will buy just out of habit. Some people will buy to make themselves feel better. And that's a vicious circle because, I go spend money to feel better. I get my credit card bill. It makes me feel worse. So I go spend money to feel better. And then I get my credit card bill and I feel worse. So what can we go do that doesn't cost us money, that makes us feel good, that we can do anytime, and begin to feel better about the fact that we still have money that we can set aside. The third thing I want to mention is this: that when someone has a hole that's already been dug, and we're looking at should I buy this or should I not? Well, if I'm $50,000 in debt, what's an extra $500? The flip side is if somebody has $10,000 in savings or 5 grand in savings, there's like do I want to spend $500? Now I'm only going to have 4,500, and I've worked really hard to get to 5,000. So again, there's a different part of your brain that fires when you've accomplished a goal versus when you're in the hole looking at that goal going, it's no use. I'm not going to get there anyway. So we have to relook at why are we doing it in the first place, and can we begin to shift our behavior? And I have one last comment on behavior. May I? I said at the Leaders Conference, it's easier to make it than it is to keep it. Making it can be relatively easy. You just have to go take action to go make money. Keeping it is the challenge because that requires behavior change. So people who say, I'm in debt, I just need to make more money and then I'd be fine. I'm like, it's not the case. You have a behavior that no matter how much you make, you'll probably spend it. So we have to look at our behavior and change our behavior because it's easier to make it than it is to keep it. And it's easier to keep it than it is to grow it. So it is about action, it's about behavior, and it's about education. And education will help you grow it over time.
Yeah. One of the things you just said that I think gave me hope for anyone who is like, oh, that's really overwhelming, is the part of your brain that is firing from a goal standpoint, what you just said. I think a lot of times, like debt, especially student debt, or even credit card debt, right? Or even farm debt can feel really overwhelming. But what I have heard from you is, okay, if I've set a goal and I'm working towards that, that's working with the positive part of my brain versus feeling the pain, which makes at least me feel like it is more possible.
100%. And to that end, the vision that I talked about setting, that future thing that we're going to do 3 years out or 5 years out, this goes back to definiteness of purpose and being a non-drifter, is that when you set a goal for yourself and you are committed to hitting that goal, you are making decisions based on the future you instead of making decisions based on your memories of what happened in the past. And what most people do is they will make decisions based on their memories, not on their vision.
Oh,
And so if we don't have a vision, I'll make decisions like, well, this felt comfortable before, so I'll go do that. And a good example is if you want to get fit, I'm following this guy who's a kind of a mindset coach, and he's a very successful entrepreneur. But he'll talk about have a picture of what you want to look like, even if you have to Photoshop abs on yourself. Right? What do you want to look like? Look at that all the time because you're making decisions based on future you, not on those chips in the pantry are going to taste really good, or I've always had a scoop of ice cream after dinner. I might as well have another one, right? That's based on memory, not based on where I'm headed and where I want to go.
Yeah. This ties back to your book recommendation of the Napoleon Hill one that I just read. To me, the biggest takeaway was your mindset is your reality.
Totally.
And exactly what you're talking about. If your mind is set on, okay, this vision of future you, that is what has led to the success of so many of these great people.
Yes.
And that can help you get there versus, okay, I think this memory or this pain or these things that I've always done,
Yeah.
making my decisions based on that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's a phenomenon that is prospection, and humans are the only species that have the ability to prospect, which means to, and it sounds like prospect, but prospection is to look forward and say, this is who I'm going to be, and now I'm going to make decisions backwards from that in order to get there. There's another great book called Be Your Future Self Now by Dr. Benjamin Hardy. That's another, testament, I guess, or a prop up book for what we're talking about here.
Love that. I will always take a book
Yeah,
recommendation. I'm a big reader,
I'll
so
give
I
you
love
another
that.
one then.
Yeah,
Are
I
you
will take
ready?
it. Yeah.
So you mentioned that our mindset creates who we are and where we're going. There's a book that I read a couple times a year, typically on vacation. But the book is called A Happy Pocket Full of Money.
Oh,
And it's by a guy named David Cameron Gikondi. He's a Kenyan man. And it is less about money and more about quantum physics and this idea that our thoughts create energy.
hmm,
The energy is goes out into the ether in both waves and particles, but it's looking for like energy.
yeah,
And when it finds that energy, it comes back to us. So if we wake up and something bad happens and we're like, today's going to be a terrible day, well, guess what? That thought sends waves and particles out into the ether, and what comes back?
exactly what we
Negative
thought.
experiences,
Yep.
right?
Hmm.
So all day long, we have this lens open for all the negative stuff that's happening. And what we would prefer to do is say, today's going to be awesome. The world is conspiring on my behalf. I don't know what kind of awesome things are going to happen today, but everything around me is probably on, it's for my own good, even if it's a flat tire, because I probably missed an accident.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm overdrawn on my checking account. Well, it's probably supposed to tell me I should stop spending,
Mm,
right? These are the kinds of things where you're like, these are positives, not negatives,
yeah.
and more positive will start to pile on. But that book is a game changer.
I love it. I love the name of it too. It
Yeah.
sounds like a fun read.
Yeah.
Okay, I could talk to you all day, Adam. This has been so fun. But we are going to move into a segment that we call speed mentoring.
I love it.
So I'm going to
Let's
give you
go.
a couple of scenarios, and I just want your quick reaction, couple sentences of what would you tell this person if you were their mentor. And I know you get to work with, we've talked about young people. You also get to work with great leaders and teams. So I've got a couple different levels of leadership in here for you to give advice to. So this person is an experienced leader. They've got a history of success, but they feel like they've lost the enthusiasm that once drove them. Um, their days are routine. They're searching for a new way to reignite their passion and approach life and leadership in a bigger, more inspired way. What would you tell them to do?
What I would tell them to do, two exercises. Number one is I would get them really clear on what their core values are. And I wrote about this in one of my books called the Build a Bigger Life Manifesto. But basically, that during COVID, all of us were on lockdown, and most of us were either we were missing connection, and we were missing contribution. And I realized in the midst of that that I was just feeling like the whole time.
Yeah.
It was after about 2 or 3 months, great being at home. But then I was like, I'm missing something big time. And I went through the values exercise, and my five core values were family, freedom, love, growth, and connection. And it occurred to me that I was missing connection because I wasn't going to have coffee with people. I
Yeah.
was getting plenty of family. In
Yeah.
fact, I was getting too much family, I
I
was
think maybe we
very
all
tired
were
of
at
each
that
other.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So rapid fire, I would say go get centered with your core values, number one, because you're missing of them somewhere or more, one or more. The second thing I would have them do is get reconnected with what is your purpose here? And if your purpose is not being fulfilled at work, could it be fulfilled in a volunteer type situation? Could it be fulfilled coaching a sporting event? Could it be fulfilled in just learning how to play the piano or guitar because you're missing creativity? I have folks who say, I'm just not getting enough adventure. Well, what are you going to do to create adventure? Um, so I would get really centered on what is that one thing purpose wise that is part of you that you could go do right away.
Awesome. I love that. Okay, different scenario. A junior team member has recently been promoted into a leadership position, but they feel uncertain about whether they truly belong in this role. They doubt their ability to inspire others and often compare themselves to more experienced leaders.
Yeah.
What would you tell them?
Well, I will say that imposter syndrome is real. Everyone has it. I have it. You, I'm sure, have it from time to
Yeah.
time.
Hmm.
We get in these situations where we're like, who am I to even say I don't know this?
Yeah.
And there's a great piece of advice that a friend of mine gave me years ago. He said, I don't know how to do this, but if I did, I would probably do it this way. And it was just like, I don't know what I'm doing, but if I did, I'd probably fill in the blank.
Yes.
And what it does is it tricks your brain into thinking, yes, I acknowledge the fact I don't know, but if I did, I would do this. So that's number one. Number two is this. I think young people today are less, and maybe young people isn't right. I think folks in general today are less willing to go to someone in a leadership role, maybe their direct supervisor or someone higher, and say, "Can I get coaching? I just like a little bit of coaching on a situation I'm engaged in because I want to make the right decision, but I really need to talk it through with someone. Would you be that sounding board for me?" So I would say, if you're unsure, find someone who probably is sure and go sit with them and say, "I have a big decision. I want to make the right decision. Could I get coaching from you on what I'm doing with this?"
Oh, and that person's definitely going to say yes.
Yes, 100%.
Okay. Last scenario for rapid fire. I'm a parent who has kids that are about to enter college. What advice or tools should I be teaching them about money, especially thinking about student debt?
I credit my father for this. He built a spreadsheet that he sent to my kids, and I'll tell you that my kids, I mentioned, they're very savvy money managers. That started when they were in junior high, and we would sit at the dinner table, and I would go, guys, how much does it cost to go to school at Notre Dame? How much do you think it costs to go to school at Iowa State? How much do you think it costs to go to school at UT Austin or USC or Pepperdine or University of San Francisco? And I would like pepper them with all these questions from all over. And we had a Alexa device in the house, and so we'd be like, Alexa, what does it cost to go to USC?
Ah.
And it was a game. We gamified it a little bit. Who's going to be closest and all that. But what I was doing was giving them a real sense of how much life costs.
Mm.
And so my dad took that to the next level, created a spreadsheet and said, I want you guys to know how much will it cost for you to do the next 4 years of school? What will you have in student loan debt if you have any? And they had to figure in how much did they have in 529 plans? What did they get in scholarship? What was the monthly or quarterly semester by semester cost? And then the end of it was, how much do you think you'll make with the major that you've taken on? What will your rent be when you get out? Pick out a car that you'd like to buy. What do you think food costs are going to be? And an interesting thing happened. My kids were pretty much spot on their numbers. My nephew, who also filled it out, had no clue what the numbers were going to be because he'd never had that dialogue before. And so, if you're a parent, I think the thing to do is have real conversations with your kids about this is what life costs. And and what my dad did for us was he put the money in our account and said, and for what it's worth, they were going to pay 100% the first year, 75% the second year, 50% the third, 25% the fourth, and beyond 4 years, it was on us. So it behooved us to be done in 4 years or less.
Oh, yeah. Way to motivate you.
Yeah. So he would create this like compressed time uh, boundary to get done. But what he was really after was us writing the check, because we wrote checks back then, us writing the check to pay for tuition, but getting a sense of like, this was an expensive semester.
Yeah.
And I just wrote this big check. I better go to class because I don't know what the exact number is, but if you skip class, it's like handing your professor $184 every single time you skip,
Yep.
right? That's a big deal.
But yeah, that makes you feel it.
Yeah.
I love that advice. Thank you. Okay, so one last segment. At AFA, we love hot takes.
Yes.
So controversial opinions, bold opinions, unconventional views. Tell me, what is one of your hot takes, I would say, either on leadership or money?
My hot take on leadership is um, this goes back to a saying my grandfather had, that uncommunicated expectations are merely pre planned resentments.
Mm,
So if I don't tell you what I expect of you as an employee and you don't do what I expect you to do, that's on me. That's not on you.
yeah.
And I've worked with team members before where something's going wrong. And I have to ask myself the question, was that on me? Did I tell them that's what I wanted done? Usually I didn't. And so, hot take, the leader's almost always to blame if someone's not doing what's expected because they were never told in the first place.
Mm, that's a good hot take. Yeah, I
Thank
love
you.
that. Personal accountability for all leaders.
Big time.
Yeah. All right. I could talk to you all day, Adam, but we probably got to wrap up. At AFA, we are all about building bridges, and hopefully everyone who has listened has now met you as a new connection in their world. Where can people connect with you? Where do you want to send them to continue the conversation or learning from you?
Yeah. Well, I so appreciate what AFA does and the opportunity to be on the show and to share this with your listeners. People can find me at adamcarroll.info. So if you want information on Adam Carroll, super simple, Adam Carroll, 2Rs2Ls.info. And then the shred method, if someone's interested in learning about how would I blast away debt and use the system, you can simply go to theshredmethod.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Adam. This has been a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed it and so glad to have you here on the show.
Likewise, thank you.